Welcome back to my series of devlogs for my game OFERO, a retro-style narrative FPS being built in the Godot engine. If you haven't watched the first video and want to know more about the background of this project, I have the link down in the description. Things are moving along pretty well, and it's really starting to feel like a game with some time put behind it. I'm going to do a rundown of the major changes and improvements made between the last video and now. A couple new enemy types were created to increase the amount of combat variety and add some chaos. Basic enemy AI functionality is all but complete. Most enemies are behaving how they should more or less, but there's some room for improving things further by giving some enemies more specific states based on the player's actions. There's a section I'll call storytelling background mechanics, plus set dressing basics like destructible objects. I spent some time reworking the overall purpose of the player's abilities besides just using them to defeat enemies, improving the player's interactivity with the game world. I began replacing some of the sound effects for weapons to give them some punch and juiciness. I also cleaned up all the broken animations that were egregiously bad, as well as making individual round reloads look really good. The most significant weapon improvement though is the introduction of bullet penetration, which opens up all kinds of new possibilities for the combat loop. There's way too many small but noticeable changes to mention, so to keep this devlog a little bit more concise than the first one, I'm only going to go into detail about the major changes or things I found to be really noteworthy. So let's get started. If you remember in the last video, I briefly mentioned I had those javelin missile projectiles, where my ultimate goal for them was to be shot from enemies on the ground to give the player a reason to not stand around in the open. So here we have that new enemy that does just that. It kind of looks like a mutated Grimace right now, but that's fine, it's programmer art. This guy runs around trying to establish a line of sight to the player. When it does so, it preps its attacks for a few seconds before firing off the aforementioned missile, then retreats to a cover location to hide away from the player. It's pretty tanky but can't defend itself, so whenever there's an opening to put some rounds on it, you should capitalize. The javelin launcher takes the role of an open-air menace. The missiles track the player just enough so that if the player is moving at full speed, they probably won't be hit at all. The player can also shoot the missiles out of the air so it doesn't feel too cheap to get hit by them. A good reason to think about having an automatic weapon with you. You may have noticed the orbs flying out of it when it died. These are the new energy orbs I made to help solve the issue I had with the state of the player's energy replenishment. I tweaked the energy regeneration to be slower, and now when you kill enemies, a shower of energy orbs flies out of them that help fill energy immediately, making this the new primary way of replenishing your energy. If I've learned anything from LEGO games and Minecraft, it's that collecting round objects strewn on the floor is satisfying. Even better than the javelin enemy is the new floor-slithering enemy I call the Stargazer. And yes, its model is loosely based off the actual Stargazer fish. It fills the role of a weak swarming type enemy. Alone, they're basically a non-threat, but throw 5 or so together and they'll quickly tear apart your health. Since the floater enemy I already have makes you look up, I also wanted something to make you look down. They die in one shot from basically every weapon, and if you shoot its head, it blows off. Ignore the ragdoll jittering, I'm still learning how to make ragdolls that don't suck. Often when I'm doing the same task for multiple days, I'll take a break and make an asset that's completely different to keep my sanity in check, which was the case with this water mesh. I used this really cool shader to create a faux ripple effect using nothing but a flat plane. Then I attached an area node to it to override footstep noises and make splash effects happen when landing in it. But then I thought, wait, hold on. I made a fish-like enemy. Let me try something. Oh, this is good. Now stargazers are absolutely evil when you're wading through water by moving 3 times the speed. You can't outmaneuver them now. You are going to get eaten alive quickly. This creates huge opportunities for level design, because now the player might be a lot more hesitant to jump into areas filled with water once they witness this for the first time. Some of the other enemies that have already been established went through significant changes. The ones that were basically untouched were the stationary sniper, charging dominion, and floater, because they were the most complete already. Although I'm planning on completely changing how the floater navigates and moves around in the near future. Feels a little stiff. The Shamblers have an all-new model and body destruction system, where if a limb hits a damage threshold, it swaps the mesh out for a damaged version. This makes them much more satisfying to fight, as well as give visual cues to the player of which Shamblers might be more damaged at a glance. Here is what I originally wanted to do for the body destruction. It turned out to be horribly inefficient, slow, and animating it wasn't really possible. I'll put this mechanic in my back pocket for something else later down the line, I suppose. One major problem with the more powerful weapons, especially the sniper, was only hitting one thing and stopping, hitting nothing behind the initial impact. It felt really wrong that a huge anti-material rifle like this could only kill one thing with one shot, so I used this deep Raycast 3D plugin to change how shooting with Raycast works. Now the Raycast that I use to detect collision when firing a weapon returns all colliders through a set distance from the origin, instead of stopping at the first collider. This plugin also allows me to change the amount of results it returns, effectively giving me customizable bullet penetration based on the weapon used. Take a look at the difference in rolls between these weapons now. Shotguns feel much more powerful up close. The sniper tears through loads of enemies, while full auto weapons like the SMG and assault rifle can still be kept as standard peppering weapons. One area of improvement Shamblers still need is being more threatening. They are maybe the least threatening thing in the game, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but they're kind of a joke to fight on their own. I think just swapping out the old crusty animations and making them slightly faster would be a good start. Next up is the gunner, which I completely scrapped most of and rebuilt from scratch, using a new NPC entity I made as a base. The NPC follows you around from a slight distance, until an enemy hurts it or gets too close, where it'll then run to cover using these cover points manually placed around the map. Once in cover, the player can move near them to have them follow again. NPCs can be targeted by most types of enemies, giving the player a little bit of breathing room and not feeling like they're being unfairly targeted all the time. I then took this NPC and reversed and tweaked the logic to create an improved gunner enemy. It can track down the player or nearby NPCs, stand in position to ready their weapon, then start shooting. When injured, they can go find cover exactly like the NPC, where they can still shoot at passing targets. The player running within melee range will also trigger them to run for cover. The gunner will be able to spawn holding different weapon types, so the player doesn't have to fight a wall of basic rifle dudes. I think the biggest challenge left to overcome is having the gunners behave like human beings and not like autonomous robot killing machines. Something that gives them some self-preservation, like dodging away from grenades and trying to run away when injured, would vastly improve them. Narrative shooters need more to do than just shooting enemies in the face. Just like the diversions I took to make things like the water, I started creating the necessary components for enhancing storytelling and immersion in the world of the game. Cutscenes are an obvious need in a narrative shooter, and it was really easy to get this trigger area and camera animation set up. It's not pretty, but the bones are there to actually block out cutscenes when I need to. Destructible objects are, in my opinion, a critical aspect of the kind of shooter I want to make. If I spray a wood pallet with assault rifle bullets, it should break. I used this destruction plugin that swaps out an original mesh with a broken mesh and explodes the pieces. Good start, so I did the same thing to the floater. Poor guy. During each level, I had the idea of diverting the player to do tasks that aren't simply running to the end of the level in order to complete it. Here's a meatball. It can be picked up like any weapon and brought to this objective drop-off area that could trigger anything I'd like to happen. I also had this old door object that I abandoned, so I gave it multiple ways to open using powers. You can overload an electrical box using your lightning, or you can overheat some type of hydraulic system using your flamethrower. This is going to be the start of a grander shift towards using powers for world interactivity and problem solving, but still keeping the original intention of giving you the upper hand in combat. Another obstacle to overcome are these special walls that only break when hit by the player's gauntlets. If I wanted to, I could also have them break from direct shots from explosive weapons like the rocket launcher, just to give the player more options. I want to take the time right now to shout out nojoule for creating this shield shader. I used it for the new look of the player's shield, gauntlet, and wall abilities, as well as tweaking it a little bit to work as an overlay for the player's shields fizzling when they get hit. So, thank you again, nojoule. I felt the weapons needed some sprucing up this far into the project. The easiest way to do that is to just replace some of the sound effects with ones that suck less. Here's some highlights. One thing that really looks kick-ass now is the individual round reloads for the scout rifle and coach gun. I'm really proud of how this turned out, from just using simple visibility calls in the animation tracks to convincingly give the illusion of feeding rounds into the gun. A subtle change that makes a huge difference in weapon feel is this torque arms function I added that gives random rotation to your arms when firing, which is especially noticeable when firing full auto weapons. I also fixed footstep logic so that there's actually arm motion while moving regardless of what you're doing. These two improvements make things feel less rigid and more natural. Lastly, I created a game modifiers tab in the settings menu that allows me to quickly change many aspects of every part of gameplay, which inevitably leads to me doing this too much. Let's set the mood. Now we're getting somewhere. This chaos with every enemy at once is still kind of legible if you already know what the enemies are and what they do. You've got the enemies at eye level and human sized like the shamblers and gunners, you've got the small stargazers on the floor, you've got the glaringly obvious floaters and stationary snipers above you, and you've got the beefy and tall priority targets like charging dominions and javelins. Now the player actually has some decisions to make to keep both themselves and the NPCs alive. I can actually start testing specific combinations of enemies now to create unique combat scenarios, and part of that is figuring out counter weapons against certain enemies. Something like the SMG can tear through a swarm of stargazers, but it's totally useless against a stationary sniper that's behind good cover. Conversely, countering a stationary sniper with a sniper of your own works perfectly, but that means carrying a weapon that is horrible against stargazers. This stuff sounds kinda obvious, but it's the underlying philosophy behind the creation of engaging level layouts and combat loops. Optimization is something I've completely neglected to do, so I ended up with a situation like this where the game lags so badly that the player's camera physics totally shits itself. Guess I'm doing some reading soon. I'm seriously pushing towards a vertical slice now. If you don't know what that is, that's a completely polished, small section of what I want the final game to be. This is going to require loads of things to be finalized and placed into the done pile that might only need unforeseen minor tweaks later, so I've made a checklist for myself to work through. Number 1, locking in and polishing the AI of all the existing enemies. Again, I can do small tweaks when necessary. The important thing is being able to block out levels without worrying if changes to the gameplay will break the layouts. Number 2, transforming a gray box level into a polished experience. Starting with a simple block out of a level, I'm going to turn that into a fully textured and set-dressed narrative experience to get used to a workflow for making the actual final levels. Number 3, full powers interaction with the environment. This goes hand in hand with creating the gray box. I need the player to feel like they can fully interact with and affect the game world. Number 4, final versions of weapon models, textures, and sound effects. Since the player will be looking at their weapons the entire time, it would be a good idea to showcase what I think is one of the strongest aspects of this project. Number 5, polished versions of enemy models, textures, sound effects, and animations. The Stargazer is actually the closest one to being fully done, it just needs good textures. Mixamo animations on default mannequin models are the bread and butter of game dev, but I can't live off that forever. Number 6, polished versions of miscellaneous effects. Time permitting, adding good versions of explosions, bullet impacts, enemy gibs, and weather would give the game a little bit more juice. Well, that's about it then. I'm still deciding on the Discord thing, mostly because I don't use Discord that much in general, and a Steam page won't be up until I have enough polish to make a true demo of the final product. In the meantime, you can follow my random updates on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Instagram whenever I remember to post things occasionally. Hopefully each consecutive devlog will get shorter and shorter as I progressively stop having the need to update mechanics and can focus on game feel and visuals. I'm feeling pretty good with where I'm at right now. There's always some hiccups along the way, but it genuinely feels like things are only getting smoother the more I dig into this project. I feel like making these devlogs gives me a huge morale boost, even just by seeing the progress I've made between these first two. I do read and respond to all the comments, so feel free to let me know your thoughts or what you'd like to see next. So, like and subscribe to follow along to the journey. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.